on this? Oh my god!
I'm beyond the ing part of balding. That is.
Yeah, just bald. I want to get there. I still like Jack Daniels' quote is like, going bald, shaving your head is the comb over of a new generation. I'm like, F you, Jack. F you. So try to get him on the show.
Jack,
are we live?
Yeah, I think
we are now live.
Yeah.
All right.
Ryan put us live without our consent.
Yeah, he does that a lot of without consent.
So if you're joining the webcast today, I just want to say thank you very much for joining BHIS talking about news. The majority of the people on the show today are wearing hats indoors for some reason. So we may have talked about that earlier. Maybe that's the solution to the shine on the dome.
It is the solution.
Dome
shine. You can't tell, but mine is lined with foil.
Just lined with foil. Actually, fun fact, and you guys can look this up. If you actually look at the patents around the frequencies that brainwaves work at, the NSA has those patented. So like no one can use those specific frequencies whatsoever. The other thing that's interesting about those particular frequencies, once again, totally not making this crap up, is that tinfoil actually amplifies those frequencies. So what they believe is this is a conspiracy within a conspiracy. The NSA put all this information out there about tinfoil hats. All the people wearing tinfoil hats freaking amplifies brainwaves so they can pick it up. The only way that you can be 100% sure is you got to buy gold foil, and that crap's kind of expensive.
But it's worth it. I mean,
the gold foil hat.
Having people read your thoughts or paying for a little gold foil, I don't know.
But stick your head in a Faraday cage and you'll be good to go.
What makes it all better is the on-air light, because that stops the brain.
Yeah, that stops it. That stops it. You do have an on-air light.
Yeah, look at that.
That's pretty.
John, you don't have one?
No, I
you
don't.
had one.
No, I don't.
Now you need one. Now to next week he's going to be huge time.
No,
I think
it must
that was
happen.
An extra $50 for that LED.
So is this going to present? Vanessa said hi. Hello, Vanessa.
Hi,
Gabriel said, is this going to prevent Neuralink from reading brainwaves? No, because that's owned by the NSA too. Are we ready to actually start the show so we can actually talk about the news, Ryan?
Yeah. Sure. Let's get it.
All right, let's kick it off. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Black Hills Information Security talking about news. We're going to be talking about the Microsoft print nightmare hack. We're going to be talking about how Amazon is facing an $888 million GDPR fine. We're going to be talking about Russia and ransomware again. We're going to be talking about Solar Maker, InfoStealer malware once again making its way into the wild. In short, we have a whole bunch of things that we've got to talk about, but I'd like to introduce you to our cast of characters, which I'm just going to say it appears to be 7 grown white dudes who can't get enough of each other. We have Brian, the shootist. For as much as I'm trying to get diversity in training and diversity in security, it's like in our training, we're trying to do, it's like we come to the show, it's like, God, yeah, all right, so we have Ryan, the shootist, who managed to keep his job for yet another week because he does an awesome job at everything that we do. We have Corey, who just started, I think today, actually. Is that right?
It is. It's my first day.
It's my first day. Welcome.
One of
us. Once again, totally not helping the white dude thing. Okay, so moving on to Monopixel, we got Noah. Yeah, there we go. Ralph, as always, who's kind of, sort of, officially the co-host. But maybe I'm the co-host because he's been on more of these than I've been on. We have Steve, who's in his 3rd week as well. Joff, who I'm sure a lot of you are surprised to see. We actually let Joff out of the basement from creating malware and implants and all kinds of modules for Cobalt Strike. It's like, shut up, Joff. Ryan, shut off his camera. He's supposed to get back to work. And then myself, John Strand. I'm the owner of Black Hills Information Security. We just don't make these really cool shirts where we're ripping off Joy Division, who is ripping off an astrophysics book with neutrinos, but we also do network penetration testing. We do forensics incident response. We sell network forensics tools. We have SOC services. We do everything, all right? We do training. If you need something, we've got it. We're like the Walmart of computer security, but we don't have greeters out front. So let's go ahead and let's get started with
I thought that was my job to be the greeter.
You were supposed to be the greeter. Check the receipt. No, your job is to check the receipts on the way out, which you can totally ignore that, dude.
Don't take my retirement gig, Ralph. Don't take my retirement gig. Now,
don't take it. Don't take it. It's mine. So earlier this month, we had the print nightmare vulnerability. An actor could take advantage of the vulnerability, get system level access. It looks like Benjamin or Gentle Kiwi basically came out and basically has released another update, I believe, to Mimikatz that allows you to get full system privileges as well. So I wanted to ask you all, is this another situation where once people start focusing on an area, once again, in the past, you had Flash vulnerabilities, Java vulnerabilities, you had SolarWinds, of course, all of their stuff is being gone through with this fine-tooth comb. It seems to me like the industry, we are not looking for vulnerabilities consistently across different software platforms, but rather it's kind of like, hey, there's some vulnerabilities over here, and everyone's like, well, that looks like it's coded like garbage, and everybody kind of dogpiles on top of that specific space.
Mm-hmm. Well, remember how it was originally released, right? It was someone who thought it was, oh, this bug's public, and then they released their version of it that was a different bug, right? So it's like, classic. There's so many bugs that people are like, oh yeah, I heard about this one. They just publish it, and it was another new bug that was, oops, 0 day. Sorry about that.
Yeah. My favorite quote from the Microsoft security team was, this is probably about 6 years ago. Microsoft had gone almost a decade without a remotely exploitable vulnerability. And somebody from the Microsoft security team told me, look, we believe that we have enumerated all attackable space on the Microsoft kernel, and we have this thing completely locked down. And he said it unironically, without joking. He honestly thought that this had been taken care of. But to his credit, we were talking that day about buffer overflow, heap overflow, traditional exploitation vulnerabilities. These are a little bit more, they're kind of off that beaten path. So he may have been right about that, but we're going to have vulnerabilities for a long time.
Yeah, this print nightmare, the one that specifically we're looking at here, is interesting because it's a driver that any user can install a printer. So when you browse to this website that he has linked here, it'll actually install a print driver for you and elevate you from user to system. So it's pretty scary that somebody could do that in pretty much any network and serve up a print driver that you could then install on the system, right?
Yeah.
And escalate privileges.
And Benjamin's kind of a frightening dude. I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but at the last DerbyCon, he gave his keynote presentation in his underwear. Not that it's relevant, not that it's relevant to this conversation. It's just, for those of you that are new to the industry, that's what we call texture, or inside baseball, which you probably didn't want to know, actually.
Yeah, Steve, one of the things we were talking about is it recommended to disable the print spool entire component on a DC, just out of curiosity, and any hardening guidelines? Just because it seems kind of unnecessary.
This one's actually a little bit different. Print Nightmare is installing a print driver. With the print spooler attack, this, like you said, there were several bugs released around the same time because they all kind of revolve around the whole print driver.
I love printers.
I love printers.
Hey, if we would have gone back a month and a half ago, and I queried you all on your what you felt about printers, you would all just say, "Oh, printers are the worst thing ever." Now, because we're pen testers, we're like, "Oh, printers are awesome."
Yeah, we like printers.
We like printers.
I love them. I love them. They're the best thing to happen to Microsoft, and I don't know, red teaming, and
a couple of months now. But Ben also released a couple of group policy settings to stop his specific attack. One was called package point and print, and setting up approved servers. And then, of course, disable outbound access to SMB, RPC, CIFS. I don't know what he means by outbound. Does he mean outbound access on the local network even, or just to the internet? as well. So we'll have to see.
I don't think you're going to stop SMB on the domain controller internally.
No, I don't. I don't think that's going to happen.
You can.
You can.
Your entire domain will break.
You could do a lot of things that'll break your stuff. Yes, that's correct.
We might as well.
It is possible. It just might cost you.
We might as well all just be using Macs at that point, for God's sake. So,
he said it.
So, somebody just said, did I hear someone's ring notification? Probably. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have one. So.
I've got stacks of crap in the basement. I've got light bulbs.
He has doorbells that just ring.
And flapping my arms around. It's picking up the motion and going off. So, yeah. So, like I said, watch this space for a little bit longer. And I think that this will be interesting for the exploit dev community, probably another month or so. And then there'll be some new shiny vulnerability. I'm predicting Oracle. I'm just going to go out on a limb. Somebody's going to find some Oracle vulnerabilities. It's been a long time since David Lynchfield has been releasing a ton of vulnerabilities, and then Chris Gates released a bunch of vulnerabilities. So I guess we're just going to have to sit tight. But if I had to pick a company that really needs more vulnerabilities and more scrutiny, I'm going to have to choose Oracle. Always Oracle. So we'll see if that prediction actually comes true.
Good choice.
Yeah. The next story I want to talk about is the Amazon faces $888 million GDPR fine. The reason why I want to talk about this story is it's not directly security related as like a print spooler vulnerability, right? But this gets into how we are actually going to fashion ourselves in the industry moving forward over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years for that particular event horizon. And this concerns me, right? Because you have GDPR, you have the EU that are creating specific requirements and guidance on how personally identifiable information can be protected. And if there's a breach, what are the fines associated with it? And this one's interesting because there was not a breach. They basically were just looking at what Amazon was collecting on people and then basically saying, hey, what Amazon is collecting is in violation of the GDPR, the statutes, requirements that are in the EU. And they basically just dropped this monstrous fine on top of them. Now, my concern on this, I kind of want to open it up to everybody for just a couple of seconds here. Is this GDPR thing, is this actually a good thing, or is this the point where GDPR has officially jumped the shark and it's now in trouble? Because I liked it as a accountability framework. If somebody gets hacked, they could be fined. I don't want to take sides with Amazon on this because, last episode was the Jeffrey Bezos phallic symbol episode. But in this particular episode, I do want to ask everybody, once again, taking Amazon out of it, I don't want to take their side, but proactively going after companies and basically saying, oh, you're not protecting data well enough, or you're collecting data without getting proper authorization. Is this a good path to go down? Is it a bad path to go down? Because Microsoft and Google are watching this very closely. So, all right, so throw it over to you guys. What do you guys think about this?
Well, my open question is, why did they pick Amazon to throw the fine on first? I think they've tried this a little bit with Google. From the good thing versus bad thing, I'm gonna have a biased opinion because I'm really on the side of promoting strong data privacy rights, and I don't have a problem with the GDPR. In fact, I think we should have an equivalent legal framework in the United States, and I wish we did. But that's really not an information security comment. That's more of a data privacy comment.
In this case, you can tell if the.
I'm going to go with Corey on this one. Let's give the FNG guy a shot. Go for it, Corey.
I mean, Amazon has a lot of money. Maybe they're just like, oh yeah, they'll pay it. It's fine. They're not going to fight it. But it does say untested interpretations of European privacy law. So maybe they're like, Amazon's they're like going back to the well. All right, well, we tried it with Google and we got shut down. Let's, I guess, try it with Amazon. I don't know.
Yeah, kind of the trial balloon for the entire thing. The thing I think is interesting about that is it's an untested interpretation. Let's hash this out in the European courts. So I don't know if I want to give GDPR the home field advantage on that one. So anyone else? There was like 4 people that had comments. So go ahead.
Is this affecting the end user or corporations? Because I would think like end users are opting into the services that Amazon is providing, right? So wouldn't this be?
And I think that's part of the rub is end users are opting in, but I don't think that they believe Amazon is being completely transparent on exactly what it is that they're actually opting in on. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It says advertising, relevant advertising.
Well,
I think
so. John's nailed it right there, though. It's important to point this out. While the end user might have opted in, there is no transparency as to how much of the end user's data has been taken, manipulated, and used for profit purposes, and that's where the real issue is. And that needs to be brought forward publicly. And I'm actually glad the GDPR is jumping on this shit and pushing it. I wish we were doing the same thing in the States and starting to push back because it is, frankly, just straight up surveillance capitalism robbery of all of our data. And it's wrong.
But let's get on that surveillance capitalism thing. The show Social Dilemma, there's been a number of books written about the topic. One of the things that I find very interesting about this is whenever people start pushing on Amazon, like if you really try to technically figure out what the hell is going on with the algorithms, even at Amazon, even at Google, at some point they're like, I don't freaking know. So we created these artificial intelligence algorithms. They're collecting and they're correlating all of this data. Oh, you like Kit Kats? Well, there's a good chance that you might be a racist or something weird like that, where they're finding these really bizarre connections. And it becomes like the self-coding problem where artificial intelligence is trying to optimize it for specific individuals. And I think that Amazon and Google, I don't think it's a good tact, but you can go to court and be like, we have no freaking clue. We wrote this thing called Skynet, and I don't know. It's just doing its own thing now. We don't know exactly, but I know the courts won't like that. But I think that this gets into kind of what Joff was talking about. Part of the fear that we have is that loss of control. And whenever I say loss of control, I don't mean me personally losing control, but I mean like literally all of us losing control, and these algorithms just are controlling us in ways that we just do not understand.
Well, I'd say it in a different way. We were never granted control.
I disagree. I disagree with that. I disagree with that because I remember whenever Amazon, like this was a number of years ago, they put up something like, hey, we're just going to buy you something, set a dollar limit of like $50 a month. We'll buy you something and we'll ship it to you and it'll be a surprise. And God damn, Amazon was nailing it out of the park every single month with me. That was really cool. Also, as far as like advertisements, people like that, the one-click thing, the advertisements where it's right exactly what you're looking for. I think that a lot of people, whenever you look at the reality of this makes your life very easy. You just go to Amazon, you click, and then the thing shows up 2 to 3 days later. They're going to accept that over their privacy, and that's a concern that I have.
Yeah, perhaps I misphrased that. Probably the real issue here is, the average user of any of these services doesn't know how much control they are actually ceding over to these various corporations.
And that might be at the heart of the GDPR thing here as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, for me, that this all goes back to back in my teen years, I guess, when I had Facebook. The thing about it was like I remember when Facebook was free.
So want to make
wasn't
a joke.
I know.
So want to make an ageist joke. Go ahead.
Go ahead. You won't hurt my feelings. But the point being is like I remember when, I don't know if you guys remember this entirely, probably, but if you were on Facebook and you watch it, like there was that time where Facebook's like, okay, we're gonna have to start charging people for this. Like we can't keep this free forever. And the ads were relatively limited for the most part. And everyone started posting to their walls like, if you copy and paste this on your wall, like you won't be charged for Facebook. And basically they saw that they're like, okay, hold on, nobody wants this. So what else can we do to make money? Because we need to make money. We're a business. Yeah. So then they went down the route of the surveillance capitalism and selling your data and personalized ads. And people, like that was when it kind of all started to go downhill as far as I was concerned. So we had control at one point and we ceded it at that point, and we haven't looked back ever since to say, wait, this has grown way further than we ever imagined when we were just like, we don't want to pay for Facebook.
But let's talk about that control a little bit more. And this gets into, you can get into the market space and things like that as well. One of the reasons why Facebook is so incredibly popular is because it's so incredibly easy, right? If you look at businesses, there's a ton of freaking businesses that I want to call them. And whenever I go to Google or wherever and I click on go to their website, it takes me to their Facebook business page. And that drives me insane. join, and it pops up and it's like, whoa, do you want to log into your Facebook account or would you like a new one? I'm like, neither, goddammit. Facebook is not the internet. I get a new one every single time. But that's just it, right? You know, we all wanted this internet to be amazing. We wanted people to have access to it. We wanted people to be able to create their own pages, and we wanted to be able to get information out. We wanted to consume information at a much higher rate, and we literally got everything we asked for. It's like a freaking monkey's paw. And as Joff was talking about, Noah, you were talking about the capitalism side of it is they needed to make money, but there's a hell of a bit of difference between needing to make money and literally making hundreds of billions of dollars. And I think that's kind of where things are getting lost.
What started with like, we just needed enough to front our operating cost is now progressed into like, oh, wait, we can make way more off of this. And then after Facebook did that, I see Facebook as the one that kind of started this whole thing. And they're the one I attributed to anyhow. Google saw like, oh, wait, we should do that. We have we have thousands of people that, you know, hit our search engine every minute. We can surely monetize on that. And then they brought that to YouTube. Amazon started doing it. Yeah.
And there gets to be a point, like, you know, we need to set up certain limits. Like, you know, okay, so my house is paid for, my kids' college is covered, my cars are paid for. Okay, that's good. To the point where you have a yacht, and your yacht is so big that it has docking stations for support yachts. There's got to be something. There's got to be
50
something.
feet max on the yacht.
And then we go back to how does all this work? And they're like, I don't freaking know. We wrote an algorithm and it just kind of took off. Is there anything about this that seems like a bad idea, folks? Nah, let's roll.
The other thing too, it's not just the money. It's also like where you take that and then buying influence, right? So buying, laws to make this the way you want it. And like, you know, you can't sue Google. You can't sue Amazon. There's nothing you can do. They're so big. Like, it doesn't matter if they do something that's egregious. It's just like, that's cost of doing business to them at this point. Like, you know, you can't actually hurt, like you can't prevent them from, you know, taking over. And that's actually why one of the current movements for Amazon, for example, like the like the monopolistic nature that they produced, and, you know, pretty much coming down to the point where they're going to probably have to make a decision whether they either run a store, right? Or that they're not, if they want to be a third party, then they can't participate in the same store. Because a lot of the stuff they're doing right now, for example, is Amazon is they're producing products on that store and then out, you know, finding the new product that some other company or somebody else sells as a third party, making an alternative, and then, you know, taking over.
Running them out of the
market. It's wild, right?
And they do it with like the dumbest things. They do it with like freaking umbrellas. Like there was a company that was selling umbrellas, and they're like, well, we don't have the Amazon umbrella. And it's like, congratulations, you're out of business.
Well, and the buying of that influence goes way further, right? Remember that folks like Google are directly engaged, and there are others that are in this too, in the IETF and rewriting the fundamental standards that the internet is based on, which means they're essentially taking over the network. Now, do we really want that?
So let's give an example, Jeff. I want to give an example. So you remember Arsnake years ago? He did a whole bunch of research on cross-site scripting vulnerability, not just cross-site scripting. It was all kinds of web application vulnerabilities. And the guy's a genius, right? And, you know, one of the conversations that we kind of had in the community was whenever you have a web vulnerability, let's say in a browser like cross-site scripting, you will have a conversation that basically comes up and says, we can actually fix cross-site scripting, at least a good percentage of it in the browser. But whenever you get to cross-site request forgery, it's like, oh, that shit's never going to be fixed. And I want to explain why, right? So cross-site scripting is where a server is reflecting something back to the browser, and the code actually executes within the browser itself, right? So you'll basically say, hey, browser, give me your cookie. And you can send it off to another website. You can send that to an attacker's website. They'll have your session identifier. With cross-site request forgery, you're making that browser do a request on another server. And the reason why this matters, and the reason why what Joff brought up is so important, this is a solid example, is we can freaking fix cross-site request forgery, except it's going to shut down every single CDN and every single ad provider on the internet overnight. Because if you lose the ability for that browser to go to a website and load content from multiple other websites, as far as ad servers, as far as loading things from Akamai, you've completely broken the entire business model of the internet in one foul swoop. So when Joff's talking about these people sitting on the boards and designing internet technologies, trust me, their number one concern is not security.
Exactly. Their number one concern is maintaining their profit motive. And so, and this is this actually comes back to a lot of conversations that, frankly, Paul Vixie brings to our conferences a lot, saying we need to continue those open standards on the internet. And he's right on this. If we allow very large corporate entities to actually take over the internet governing bodies, we have lost the internet entirely.
Yeah, and I think for Paul Vixie, whenever he presents at our conferences again, and he's going to, I think what's going to happen is when people come funneling into our conference to see Paul talk, we're basically going to have a table there with a bunch of drugs. And it's going to be like, so what's your drug of choice? Oh, I'm a drinker. Okay, here's some scotch. What's your drug of choice? I'm big into pot. Okay, cool. We got some Pakistani purple right down there. That's for you. What's your drug of choice? Heroin? You're going to need it, buddy. What's your drug of choice? Oh, I don't do any drugs. Great, we'll assign one for you. Here you go. Because when you're done with a Paul Vixie, no, that's Dan Kaminsky that passed away. Lucky number 7. It was Dan Paul. Kaminsky. Yeah. Paul's still alive and kicking and riding motorcycles. Because when you go to Paul's talks, there's some of the most depressing freaking talks in the world. Because this is a dude that was there when the magic was made, and it was made in the basements of places like this. And now all of a sudden that's all being taken away from us. And that has security implications for sure.
Well, also, weren't they going to block all third-party cookies at one point? And they were like, "No, let's not do that because money."
Yeah, that was actually, I think that came up. I'm not sure. I might be getting this wrong. That was one of those things that originally came up in Firefox. They were talking about doing that, and that got shot down real fast. So
they're like, "Hey, we talked to the accountants, and they said no."
Well, and just for a second, I mean, let's say Firefox went through and did that, because they tend to sometimes do stuff like that, where they started saying like, hey, no, we are going to block all third-party cookies in our browser. What would you see? You would then go to Amazon.com and be like, looks like you're using Firefox. We highly recommend you use Google Chrome.
Use the Amazon browser.
Use the Amazon browser. Do you like Firefox? You're going to love this browser. It's the exact same thing as I'm sitting here using
Firefox does not work properly on our website, but if you move to these alternatives...
Right, they'll just try to kill it, though. Like, if you go buck against them, like, if you try to fight them, just like you were saying, you can't sue them, you can't even try to go buck against it.
I think we can try and go against it. We just have to have a big enough community voice.
Sure.
I see. I see it. This is, goddamn, I can't believe I'm going to argue with Joff because he's being optimistic. That almost never happens, ever. I'm optimistic for a different reason. I disagree with Morpheus 01736. I disagree with Joff. I do not think it's one of those things where we get enough people to create an uproar. I think something catastrophically bad has to happen. Like all of the customer profiles for Amazon, everything, credit card details and purchasing history gets leaked. That type of thing is what finally gets people's attention. And I think that that's the only way that we as a society actually learn. And even at that, I'm still dubious.
Oh, hold on, John. You mean like an Equifax breach?
Oh, absolutely. But even at that, you look at Equifax. Where's the Equifax data? Can I go download it?
I mean, no, because it was Russian. It was Russia. It was definitely Russian.
So there is a huge difference. There's a huge difference between a breach like Equifax and a breach where like this data is actually available and someone could go sifting through it. I mean, Ralph has freaking computers in the background, and I think Steve helps him with this, that are going through these third-party data breaches and pulling this data down and pulling it in. But we haven't had a monstrous level data breach for quite a while where all this information isn't just breached, but it's publicly accessible.
John, recently LinkedIn was not breached. This is how bad it's getting, okay? LinkedIn wasn't even breached. They weren't hacked. All they did was scrape the data, and it might as well have been a breach. They were calling it a breach because it's all public. Like that's how much data one organization has on you.
Same with
Facebook's
Facebook.
like, we don't identify this as a breach. It's just
This is not a breach.
It's just
This
all
is
the
normal data.
It's just all users' mobile numbers. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
You can already guess those. Just start with 1, 2.
It's all numbers. It's just a series of ones and zeros. Just put them in the right order.
Home addresses, personal preference. It's fine. This stuff's not important. What's your favorite
That's
dog?
public. We have an algorithm that can pull that in 4 seconds. It's fine.
Yeah, dude,
Yeah.
this is nothing. This is nothing.
Well, and
Google already
that
knows this about you.
That does kind of go back to the whole, the users aren't even aware of what they're giving away. I mean, because you see it on the social media too, like, oh, well, here's a whole list of things that you can fill in. Like, what was your, first boyfriend's name? What was your cat's name? Like, meanwhile, like some guy receives this form and he's like, oh, good, let's go see what John did.
So Kevin Johnson,
People
years
just give it
ago,
away.
Kevin Johnson had a presentation called Social Zombies Want to Eat Your Brains. And in this presentation, he was creating apps, and the apps would say, please tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your mother's maiden name? What street did you grow up on? All of those things. Well, Facebook shut that down, and he got a few hundred people to fill that crap out on this Facebook app. And But then I think it was him, or maybe it was somebody else, took that one step further, and it was like, how well do you know your friends? Put in a friend's name and put in their mother's maiden name, what street they went at, what street they grew up on, and what was their primary school. And it was amazing how many people literally filled that stuff out unironically. Like they were like, oh yeah, well, I know John. John went to this particular school, and he went to this. I grew up with John, and I'm using that because I literally had friends that I went to grade school with that was filling that crap out on my behalf. And after a short period of time, Kevin was like, dude, this is your mother's maiden name. This is the street you grew up on. This is the school you went to. It was that easy.
Yeah, I think my favorite one of those was there was a video somewhere on YouTube or something, and it was someone asking people basically to tell them what their passwords were, and it was effectively like to be like, all right, hey, can I ask you a few questions? Like, what's your mother's maiden name? And they'd tell you that, and they're like, okay, so if you were, then it got to the point where they're like, if you were to like make a password, what would you normally use for your password? And they'd be like, well, I would usually use like a number, and then my cat's name. And they'd be like, oh, what's your cat's name? And they'd be like, oh, my cat's name is Fluffy. Oh, what's your favorite number? 42.
What year were you born?
Yeah.
That's one of the things I hate about Mr. Robot is Mr. Robot makes this crap look hard. Breaking into Storm Mountain. It's like, we've done that thing. And it's like, that wasn't that hard. Like it really wasn't.
It is. So. It is insane how many people do like those little online surveys. Like, oh, tell what kind of Harry Potter character would you be, right? You could just throw questions in like that, or like it's insane how you could hide that information, right? Those questions, and people love it too. They're like, oh yeah, no, this is interesting. What kind of Harry Potter character would I be? All right.
I one time as a joke posted something. It was along the lines of like, what's your stormtrooper number? Like add SN dash and then your social security number. And then I had like a family member actually reply to it. I'm like, no, you need to take this down like right now.
Right now. This was a bad idea.
It's kind of
I guess, Joff, are we coming around to, we're just screwed because now I'm starting to believe after talking to the quorum, I'm afraid that even if there's a massive breach, all it takes is like, hey, everybody, we feel real bad about it. We're going to give you 2 free years of free credit reporting and a smoothie. All right. So everyone's going to be like, oh, smoothies.
Well, look, I just in my defense, I have to remain an optimist because the reality is I would take all the drugs on the way into the talk. I mean,
on the way to Paul's pocket.
So,
Mr. Thayer, one, Mr. Thayer.
Just one, choose one. And the other thing I would encourage everybody to do is just get a little educated about this particular issue. There's 2 things that I would recommend. And one is go out and watch that movie, The Great Hack, that Netflix put out. It's about the Cambridge Analytica stuff, and it's an amazing compilation. And the other one is read The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by
yes.
Zuboff.
Yes, that's a great one.
And that's a big book. It's a heavy read, but it will open your eyes. Then, of course, read about Stuxnet, Countdown to Zero Day. You've always got to read that.
Yeah, you got to. All right, what other stories do we have? Or was that the last one today?
No, we had some other ones.
More? Let's get some
other
other
ones.
ones.
Only the second one, John.
Oh my God, Solar Maker, InfoStealer,
we
malware.
blew half the show on one story.
Yeah, we had to stop.
Is this the new thing now? Just take Solar and just add something to the end, and that's the malware of some sort, or Solar Solar found it. Solar did it. I don't know.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is so this is a highly modular .NET based information stealer and keylogger, and I wanted to ask, like, we have these phases in security where at the beginning everyone was using Perl. If you go back to Rainforest, Puppy, and Whisker, you were all using Perl. The original version of Metasploit was written in Perl. Then it moved over to Ruby. A ton of people used Ruby for like 2 weeks. They said, F that, HD Moore, you're insane. And then they moved to Python, and Python was the weapon of choice for a long time. We now have some people using Golang. And it seems to me like all the cool kids are using .NET. And I think I've got a great group of people here to talk about why is .NET such an attractive platform for attackers.
Well, I mean, if I'm looking at this article and what they're saying is .NET looks to me like it's PowerShell, and it loads a DLL that might be .NET. But from an attacker standpoint, .NET's great along with PowerShell as well, because it's on the system. So if you're phishing a user or moving laterally or something like that, that's probably going to have .NET built into the system, and you can attack accordingly. But we've seen over the last couple of years a lot of the vendors hooking with anti-malware scanning interface and things like that, to where these what were once memory resident attacks are now being detected and blocked. So it was, I think, around 2015, 2016, PowerShell really took off, and then we switched to .NET, and things are kind of just moved. And sometimes what's old is new again. We're back to C and C++. It just kind of evolves over time, and I think we'll see the landscape continue to change. But .NET's not going away. We'll continue to see adversaries use things like this for a long time to come.
The real question is, what percentage of this was pulled from GitHub? From your repost.
99% was all from Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen
specifically byte bleeders. Marcello's like, boy, there sure seems to be a lot of downloads in my GitHub repository out of Russia. And you're talking about booleang and that type of stuff, and Marcello did that nested coding languages. I think it makes it more difficult from a reverse engineering perspective, just because .NET is so flexible. We go back to jokes of Steve Ballmer going developers, and there's something to be said whenever an operating system literally goes, and a company literally goes out of its way to try to meet every single developer where they're at, and opening up all these different APIs, supporting all of these different languages, and you kind of create a really pretty nifty attack surface for that platform. Because isn't Microsoft now talking about bundling Python by default in the operating system in the near future?
Well, yeah, and we're also talking about implementing Android and iOS apps as well.
Yeah, the Dolphin emulator is going to be built into 11, so you can run iOS, or not iOS, Android apps natively. Ooh, so much fun.
That's why it completely blows my mind whenever they're like, oh, well, Intel and Windows 11 is going to have this TPM that you have to have installed, because, running security on the microchip itself is where we need to be. It's like, hold up, we've got a whole crap ton of other problems we haven't even begun to solve, and what you just talked about doesn't solve a damn one of them. So,
but remember, John, they solved all of the remotely exploitable code in Microsoft Windows.
Yeah,
all of those are done. So we don't have to worry about buffer overflows and things like that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, no, it's totally fixed everything.
So lucky number appeals to. Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say a lot of stuff that appeals to people about the C or about the .NET framework, that appeals to like normal developers, that Microsoft markets it like it's cost effective, it integrates with all the operating system stuff natively, you can just spin up and go. That works for malware developers too, right? They're like, cost effective, well, we need to make X amount on this malware to pay for all these developers. So I mean,
so it goes both ways. I mean, I'd like to jump in and make a comment. The nice thing about .NET is, on the high level, you get a tremendous amount in the framework in terms of flexible, usable APIs, including encryption, by the way. Like if you want AES encryption in your malware, you could just use it, for example, right? Which is something that, a lot of us probably want, right? I write malware quite a lot. The other thing is the embedding concept is nice, right? You can have .NET within .NET within .NET, and go into layers and layers of obfuscation. And then the other one, and Schmoz on the chat actually put it out there, is because of all the integrated support into the operating system, that living off the land capability sort of comes built in with .NET. So if you throw an assembly over onto something, you've got a lot of options for running it, natively in the operating system, which is kind of cool, right? And now it's got multi-platform. Remember, .NET has got to .NET Standard and .NET Core, and it's Android, Linux, the whole bit. Not only that, on the Python side, Guido van Rossum, and people might not have noticed this tweet, but I picked up on it, is working for Microsoft now. Guido is the original Python author, the original, the guy, right, that started the Python project. So Python will probably make its way into Windows at some point. I don't think Guido's over there just twiddling his thumbs, right? So it's going to be interesting times.
Very cool. All right. This is the awkward silence.
Oh, and AMSI? It's easy to turn AMSI off, by the way. Love, hate. I don't know that I care about AMSI. Anyway.
You want to talk a little bit about that, Joff?
It's like UAC. It's not considered a security boundary.
Yeah, it's like dropping a carrot. I got to follow it up now. So
it's like Joff shows up, hand grenade, runs away. It's like, what the hell was that about? Boom.
Later.
All right, go ahead.
So remember, AMSI DLL is loaded on a per process basis, right? So if you have a .NET binary that you're running or a .NET assembly that you're running, and you load up AMSI DLL, you can actually patch the scan buffer routine in your code to ignore the code that the .NET reflection assembly.load method uses, right? So let me back up a minute. What Framework 4.8 did, which is .NET Framework 4.8, before they went into this, multi-platform standard stuff, is they integrated AMSI scanning into any time that you load a .NET assembly. And that was a direct response to what we were doing in the security community, because we moved away from PowerShell, right? We were like, oh, crap, PowerShell's getting busted all over the place because they've hooked it all into Defender and AMSI and everything else. So we moved, lock, stock, and barrel over to .NET, and everybody was starting to code things in C#. Well, there is in the reflection assembly a method called assembly.load. And assembly.load did not originally run things through the anti-malware scanning interface. Essentially, it's called the AMSI scan buffer routine or scan string. There's two methods in there. Scan buffer is what you care about because that's the one that would scan the binary DLL content looking for potentially malicious .NET assemblies. Well, it's in a per process basis that AMSI DLL's in memory. So what you can do is actually just overwrite the scan buffer opcodes that look at the length of the buffer that you're scanning, and just write a 0 in there. So now AMSI thinks it's scanning a 0 length buffer, and AMSI's happy.
And you can do this. You can do this as a standard user,
process. Right? Standard user because you're doing it on a per process basis.
Yeah. So that's fun.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool.
Yay!
So AMSI and Microsoft responded saying, "Look, this was like a nice to have, but this is not the only depth of our security." They did that.
There you go. This is as good as it gets.
Oh my God! See,
I was really hoping you would say it was a feature, actually, but oh well.
Well, and this gets into, I think I talked about it last week, Josh Wright's law, which is, a lot of the stuff doesn't get fixed until there's a module in Metasploit for it. So, maybe Metasploit needs, it wouldn't be an encoder, but something like an encoder, their evasion techniques that just, does that. And then they're like, oh crap, it's a push of a button and anyone can do it. We might need to fix that, ladies and gentlemen. So,
what I think is more interesting, but it's a longer discussion, is when Microsoft tried to kick all the anti-malware vendors out of the kernel. And this is Vista days.
That's right. Mm-hmm. When they got sued by McAfee, I think.
Well, it doesn't surprise me. They introduced PatchGuard, and they prevented the anti-malware vendors from hooking the service descriptor table and the global descriptor table, if I remember the names correctly. I have to go reference that for myself. But anyway, basically, they prevented the antivirus and anti-malware companies from hooking things at the kernel layer. And what it drove them all into into user land, which forces them to do per process hooking, especially in the EDR space, which they do. Anyway, and then the anti-malware / EDR companies go ahead and write a signed kernel driver to get them back into the kernel space, but that can only do limited things with that.
And that was a compromise, if I remember correctly. Microsoft actually backed up because McAfee and Symantec in the background, from what I heard, were actually threatening Microsoft and basically saying, "Look, if you don't allow us in to the kernel, what we're going to do is we're just going to write exploits for the kernel to get us access to the kernel to do what we need to do." And then Microsoft threatened to sue and said that's under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, you can't do that. And then they responded back, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act has a provision in it that says that you can reverse engineer for the purpose of interoperability. So there's a lot of political back and forth that actually went down with all of that.
That's right.
But basically boiled down to, well, you give us a code signing certificate, we'll allow it in, and that's basically it. But they didn't get it into everywhere.
Microsoft's assertion was by keeping people in the kernel, they were destabilizing their operating system, and I think that is a correct assertion. But one way or the other, that's what happened, and so that's the land we live in today. And it's kind of interesting. You might be able to tell I spent a lot of time looking at this stuff.
Yeah. Back to the dark place, Joff. Back to the dark place. Dude, thank you so much. No. So, and that's kind of what I wanted out of the .NET thing. Is kind of a conversation. It's some of the, and I think Joff brought up a lot of really good points. Once again, why attackers want to go there is because there is here is everywhere. It's in the operating system. And Steve mentioned this, and Corey mentioned this as well. It's just that's a great language because not just what the language can do, but all the hooks and the interfaces that you have with the operating system itself as well. So, all right. So, any other final news stories?
Did we talk about Petit Potam at all?
We did last week. We talked about.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did we talk about the Russia's Russia's new form of organized crime?
We did before we went live. We probably should. Go ahead, Ralph.
Oh yeah, just that their new. This is a New York Times article, so sorry for the paywall, but that the article is talking about how Russia's, organized crime is kind of menacing the world, right? Like their acceptance and kind of like turning a blind eye to their organized crime, doing all the ransomware attacks is, kind of, a bunch of punks on the internet kind of thing, right? Messing with every other country, messing with intelligence agencies and other kinds of like law enforcement agencies, having to try to figure out who it was, only to find out it's people in Russia, and hopefully you don't go to Prague because that's the only place we can catch them, right? Yep. So that's kind of what the article's about, and how much money it's costing us, right? Like it's not free. It's not a, it is a big disruption, and then where that can go from here, right? Like how do we prevent it from happening or limit it? And right now we don't have a whole lot of options, and that's like the thing before the show was like, does it go to war or something like that? So that's really
is there any like national policy at all about like, do we negotiate with ransomware actors? Like with the Kaseya thing, it was interesting. Like they were like, 70 mil or whatever. Like could we just like band together and pay it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is that what they were trying to go for? Where they're like, all right, we're just going to national, like the USA just writes a check to like buy all, I don't know. It's just like, do we negotiate with the ransomware actors or not? I don't really know. Is there a national level policy on that? I feel like there's not.
But I think at some point, you get to the problem of escalation. How far do you escalate? Because, if you're looking at China, you're looking at Russia working through third-party intermediaries for trying to break into places, whether it's, the NSA, the NRO, FBI, CIA, Department of Justice, wherever. They're definitely working through intermediaries because that kind of quote unquote keeps their hands clean. But if you have ransomware authors that are kind of protected by Russia launching that attack, if you're nation state to nation state, how the hell do you escalate that, right? Do you go to Russia and then start doing sanctions? Do you get to the point where it starts getting kinetic? I think that's the difficulty. Is this is so asymmetric, and it's so difficult to say, okay, well, if you do this, then we're going to do a trade embargo. I think that's really hard.
I think that's what we're going to start seeing. We're not going to see like attacks. We're just going to see like turns in the like sanctions, trade embargoes, other ways. Like we have other knives we can kind of turn, I guess. and they're not going to be, starting a war. It'll be making those sanctions. And the other thing too is that it's not just America, right? It'll be other countries that are more closely tied with Russia's, overall like lifeblood, right? And how effective that is, who knows? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just saying those will probably be the first things we do, though.
Or we'll see the internet completely balkanized, which I've been predicting for a long time, where countries just say, "Screw it, we're running a network for our country and nowhere else."
Yeah.
If there's a cyber space race, what are we racing towards? iPhone remote root? Like,
yeah.
Well, like, wouldn't it be interesting if you were just like, well, my policy now at the company is I block all IPs from Russia, right? So, like, I don't know. That's probably not going to help that much, but
no.
Start.
And honestly, like my concern about where this goes, like if we're looking at escalation, I don't think the United States can escalate very well. I don't think that most westernized countries can escalate very well. But if you look at escalation on China and Russia and Iran, North Korea, oh my God, it's the axis of evil, which is just for the record would have been a badass punk rock name. But what my
we have
problem
choices.
But what I'm saying is those sides can continue to escalate. And my fear is that the blood is in the water, and a lot of those countries know that they can severely impact the infrastructure, not just in Ukraine, but also in the United States. And my biggest fear is we get into a really bad blizzard, snowstorm, heat wave down in the Southwest, something like that happens, and they end up shutting down entire power grids. That scares the living hell out of me because that isn't just possible. That's on the table. That is more than likely a skill set that these countries have that they can use. And I don't believe that Western countries like the United States are in a position to where they can react to that very well. Because right now, having conversations with lots of organizations, anytime, what the hell? Let's pick on Center for Internet Security because that's fun. If we look at Center for Internet Security, they took the controls over from the SANS Institute, and there were questions about two-factor authentication. And the question was, should we make two-factor authentication something that is absolutely a requirement? And the people that won out at Center for Internet Security were the people that said, that's pretty onerous on some companies. That'd be really hard. Maybe we should strongly recommend it, but not make it a requirement, because you're going to have some things where they just can't do that. F that. We need NIST, we need CIS, we need these different control frameworks and audit frameworks and government organizations to come in and basically be like, 1, you're going to patch your stuff. 2, you're going to change default passwords. 3, you're going to make long, strong passphrases. 4, you're going to two-factor authentication absolutely everything. You're going to go to application. Like, we need to set up new standards that basically say this is the way the world is. And I go back to PCI. Goddamn, PCI still says 7-character passwords are okay. Why? Because it might be hard for some companies. Because the Russians and the Chinese, they don't care. They're not going to look at it and be like, oh, well, we shouldn't pick on them because they're running Solaris Spark backends. No, they're coming. And that's what I'm talking about is how do we actually escalate this? The only lever that we can escalate on is on the defensive side. And all of our different audit and compliance frameworks that are out there are too spineless to actually come up with a compliance framework that actually puts the right security in play.
Yep. Agreed. And we're the biggest target. That's the other big issue, right? Because it's very easy to go, well, you guys suck. You got all this stuff that's vulnerable. It's like, yeah, but we invented the stuff and we've got the most stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Right? Yeah, it's market share. Yeah. Sure, it's all old and busted, but it's our old and busted stuff.
It's our old and busted. Anyway.
So.
Oh, and by the way, the FBI does not support paying the ransom in response to a ransomware attack per their.
No, they want companies just to roll over and die. So.
It's better for everybody.
It is. It is. If you just go to your dying hole.
That was my company strategy, actually. Just die.
Yeah.
Just die. Yeah.
I feel like this whole conversation this evening has come full circle.
Probably has.
We have gone
around
and we'll come right back to
it.
I can make it more full circle if you want, Joff.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we were talking about, just roll over and die, but what if they're too big to fail?
No. So are you saying are you saying that we need Russia to hack somebody like Google to shut them down, to make them go away?
And then they can't pay the ransom. Yes.
I'm not saying that. So,
like if they hack Google,
interviewing,
like, is that the explosion we need?
I could just see someone at Amazon. Hold on, Jeff. You can't go into space again. Why? Well, there was an attack, and we're gonna have to sell your yacht. Not my yacht, and your spaceship company.
Someone please
my spaceship company.
Ransom the spaceship. We have to do this.
And Jeff, I just want you to know that the only thing you have left in your name is a small town in Canada called Schitt's Creek. We're going to send you and your wife there. But it's okay because we're getting new seasons and everybody likes that.
So, everyone does.
And just as an aside, your spaceship violated our HR policy, damn it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. You did note, I think we talked about the last one. There was like a big, what was it? List, or what is it called, like signing list, where everyone was like trying to sign up to like say not allow him back, not allow like a petition
to petition.
A petition. There you go. Yeah, to not allow him back from space. I'm like, how does that work? It would be funny though if they ransomwared him for like the codes to come back, and it's like the space shuttle has been hacked, and now it will not return to Earth. Sorry.
Unless
you have 35 minutes to pay Bitcoin, or we will send you to the sun.
So many Bitcoins. I'm like, oh man, they're going up.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing. Russia
dropped off the cliff.
If we look at all of the bad things, and there's a lot of bad things, and I know people are like, my God, these people are talking about everything burning with a smile on their face. Exactly. We've known that crap's burning for the past 20 years, folks. Yeah. Like, we know it's just now happening, and this is inside. We're really, really tore up over it. But on the bright side, things are only fragile till they break. Once something breaks horribly, then we see progress. Ransomware brought in EDR. We got Cylance and CrowdStrike and Carbon Black, and that got things better, kind of.
Yes, it did.
And that's awesome, right? That's awesome. If you look at Russia doing what they're doing, they're bringing on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and I think that that's great, right? Decentralizing currencies, I think, is something that we should have been doing for a long time. So there's good things that come out of this, but the point is, it's gonna frickin' hurt for us to get through it. So be ready. But it's a good pain. It's a good pain.
Right. How does that saying go? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Makes you stronger.
And puts you in therapy. And with that, let's wrap this up. Ryan, thank you very much, everybody from the BHIS team, for joining. I greatly appreciate it. And to everybody that came in and watched this live, don't you have something better to do with your day? If not, I'm gonna do a YouTuber move that I've always wanted to do. If you guys could do me a favor and smash that subscribe button, we would greatly appreciate it. And with
he said it.
Let's take us out.
Yeah,
ring the bell. Ring the bell.
Now